Hello, everyone, and welcome into another Equinox Roundtable. Today, we are meeting with President Christopher Capuano. We would like to thank him for being here to talk to us about the spring semester academics and also a little bit about the campus restructuring that is going to be happening this fall. So thank you so much, President Capuano, for coming on with us.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
So our first question actually came from some students to our Instagram. Is there going to be a formal process for students to opt out of going back in person, or is that going to be more on like a student-professor basis?
So we were just discussing this. You mean this spring, next
Yeah.
week? So my understanding is that any student that wishes to remain studying virtually may do so. So we stated that, I believe, right up front. And you don't have to provide any medical excuse or anything like that. If you're not comfortable coming back to class, first of all, not many classes are actually going to resume any in-person instruction. So everybody should understand that. Most classes, like the fall, will be virtual throughout. So for those classes that were intended to be on what we call a hybrid basis, to be in person, none of them have happened to this point, but they're scheduled to begin next week. But in no instances would students be required to do that. If they wish to continue studying virtually, they may.
Thank you. And our next question has been a big concern for a lot of commuters. What common spaces will be available if a commuter does have to stay on campus between classes, or if they have one that's in person and then they immediately after, like in the 15-minute break, have one that's virtual that they would have to be on their laptop for?
So good question. And I don't know that I can give you the best answer to that question, but I know that there are designated areas like the computer labs, into which students can go and use the computers and whatever else equipment they might need to use. But on a more limited basis than would normally be the case, they can go in on a schedule into the dining areas. I think there's probably some space there that would be available, but again, on a limited basis and according to a schedule. And the libraries too would have, I think, some limited hours where students might be able to go in there. But let me stress the fact that in entering any of these spaces, all the guidelines must continue to be followed, and that is you have to mask at all times. Nobody's allowed on campus without masking. So there is no time, unless you're a resident student and you're going into your own dormitory room, should you not have a mask on. And all the distancing guidelines should be followed as well. So when you go into those spaces into which students are permitted, you must observe those guidelines. And those spaces will be clearly marked, where you can go, where you can't go, and where you may be seated, where you may not be seated. So those are the spaces. I think generally you're going to find some space, I think, in the student center, particularly in the dining facilities, and some in the library and in the computer labs. The rec center will not be open as is normally the case. Even the student athletes that are doing what they need to be doing in there, it's all being done on a schedule right now. Very, very limited, low density basis. So I know even the teams are being instructed to split their squads into practice in 10 student athlete pods so that they can make sure everybody's staying apart with masks on and all of that. So you don't have teams with 40 people going into any space all at once. So that's, I think, generally the protocol. The best person to speak to confirm all of this would be Dr. Ferrara, who's a vice president for finance and administration. She's actually leading up the health and safety team. So admittedly, I don't have all the specifics on, how much space in each building, but that's my understanding.
Okay, thank you. This is actually another question that we had come from a commuter student on our Instagram. Will there be surveillance testing done for commuters that have to be on campus? I know there is surveillance testing being done for residents, but some commuters were wondering if that's going to be something that's also expected if they do return for in-person courses.
Yeah, so to this point, very good question. To this point, we've handled commuter students differently. We have had commuter students tested, and some have tested positive. We have an obligation to do that. So my understanding is not everyone is being tested. First of all, you should know that we're doing random testing as far as surveillance testing. If anybody is determined to have symptoms or even a fever, they may be asked to take a test immediately, out of as a precaution and to make sure that they're not coming onto campus unknowingly with the virus. But I do believe that we are going to be doing some testing of commuter students on a random basis. And that information, certainly would be provided to students that, have expectations to return to campus. The expectations for commuter students to return to campus, I think I should underscore this, is just to go to class, not to be on campus and stay there as they normally would for hours, and even the entire day, unless it were absolutely necessary. We're trying to limit the amount of density. So I think this will work out because, as you said earlier, I think a lot of students are going to continue to want to study remotely. And the number of students that are actually studying on campus will be small, other than the resident students who also go to class, go back to your dorm room. So we're not living in ordinary times here. I think everyone understands that. But I will check on that. And I think, we should be, as we open it up and have more people coming onto campus. By the way, that includes faculty and staff. They should as well be included in the plan for surveillance testing on a random basis.
And we have one final question regarding the specifics about academics and campus, and then we will move into the section about the restructuring plan that you had sent out about campus executive and the Dean of Students offices. So I know that we did an article regarding Rutgers' stance on the vaccine. Does FDU have any plans as far as the vaccines go, whether it will be offered on campus like the flu shot is, or if it's not going to be required in any sense like Rutgers is doing?
Thank you. That's a good question as well. So I'll tell you what my thinking is about the vaccine. First of all, we've volunteered. The state, as you know, health department controls not only the distribution of vaccines, but also establishing the vaccination sites across the state. So there's been a number of presidents, including Rutgers president and myself, that have argued for making, not all, but certain university campuses, what we call microsites. So not macro sites. We don't want to be sites where everybody from the public is coming onto our campus to get a vaccination. But one of the things I've argued is if we can become a microsite for faculty at our own institution and our initially faculty and staff and faculty and staff at neighboring institutions, so that you don't have to put one of these at every university to get vaccinated, that we not only have the ability to do that, the resources to do that, we would like to do that. So the answers to this point has been, well, there's a shortage of vaccines right now. And consequently, we're not establishing any more sites, macro or micro, at this point. But I'm hopeful that at one point they will establish these micro sites. I think that it's much more likely when the J&J vaccine becomes available. It's going through FDA review now for emergency use authorization. I think it's fairly certain that will happen. The nice thing about, and I just read a wonderful op-ed this morning that I actually forwarded to the commissioner of health at the state. And I'm going to be on a call tomorrow afternoon during which we'll be talking more about this. But there was a president actually that published an op-ed in the Chicago Tribune yesterday that I happened to read and thought was wonderful. And basically what he was suggesting with the J&J vaccine, the J&J vaccine does not have the efficacy rate that the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines do. It's still, the efficacy is still good, but it's significantly lower. And it's also been determined in the clinical trials that it's not as effective as Moderna and Pfizer for reducing serious illness among those that get sick, and hospitalizations are still high. So the thinking that was proposed that this could then very well, and it's also one shot, not two, and it's more of a traditional vaccine. and I don't know that this is going to happen, but I'm going to advocate for this. This could very well be a vaccine that we should be looking to distribute to 18 to 29-year-olds, because most of the spread that's occurring nationwide is occurring in those groups, including college students, as you know, and they travel and go places quite often, right? So the thinking is that that maybe the states, we're trying to encourage the states is to designate and the other reason why you would not want to give the J&J vaccine to people that are older and more vulnerable is because it's less efficacious. So if it doesn't reduce serious illness and hospitalizations, why would you give it to the people that are most vulnerable? It's not going to do them a lot of good. It's a good idea to give it to college students because not many of them get sick in the first place, and very few actually ever become hospitalized unless they have an underlying condition. So if you have a group that's not likely to get sick, but yet they're spreaders, they can transmit it, then it makes sense to me that you would give the J&J vaccine to those, to those individuals, 18 to 29-year-old. This is all very brand new. It just happened as of this morning. But, to answer your question, I am hopeful that FDU might become a microsite. And we will be, if we can, we will be vaccinating students on campus. But we're a ways from that happening yet. I don't know whether it's weeks or months, because as you know, the situation is very fluid. But you should know that your president and, is very much advocating for this. And if we can make it happen, we'll do more than volunteer. We're pushing to try to make it happen. I would love to see that happen with the J&J vaccine.
Okay, thank you. That was very informative. I have read up a little bit on the vaccines, and our managing editor, Amaya, is kind of like our person who's on top of the vaccines. So I did know that the J&J one is supposed to be coming out hopefully soon, but they aren't sure exactly who's going to be able to take it and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So you had sent out an email regarding the restructuring on campus. I know I had reached out to Angelo and I did a short article whenever this first came out talking about, communication structures and that sort of thing. But I know there are still a lot of concerns from students on campus. I'm sure you've seen the Save FDU Instagram page and everything. The first question that I had is, with the new positions being introduced, how exactly is this going to affect the employees in the offices? I know Angela said that there still are going to be some people on the ground for each campus working. So how many jobs are we looking at that are still going to be kind of under these new positions, but not necessarily the same offices that they were before?
Okay, good question. And you should know, I had a meeting, I lose track of when these meetings happen. There's so many of them, but I think it was, may have been the week before last. I had a meeting with the two SGA presidents at their request and the Dean's Advisory Council at the Florham campus. I think it was about 8 or 9 students. They asked many of the same questions, and Provost Small was there, and Vice President of Enrollment Management, Dr. Schulteis, he was there too. So we answered, and are open to answering questions. I think there's some misunderstanding about a lot of this, but let me try to help with that a little bit. So the first thing you should know is that everyone in the positions that are going to be affected are still in their positions. They're not being terminated or dismissed for any reasons that have to do with their performance or anything like that. They're all wonderful people doing great work. This is not about people. This is about a restructuring that I believe will elevate campus operations and student affairs as two major areas at the university, elevate them to a level that will bring greater importance, a greater sense of urgency with respect to issues that are critical, and a response that's going to be more timely. Why? Because these new positions, unlike the current ones, will be positions within my cabinet, the president's cabinet. So the dean of students right now is not represented in my cabinet. The dean of students on each campus reports to the campus executive. The campus executive is on the cabinet, but not 1, 2. And so the information I get on student affairs is secondhand, and it's duplicated, and it's different. It's coming from each campus. So what this change seeks to do is get one voice to speak at the level of the president's cabinet so that we get a clear and hopefully more uniform understanding about policies and procedures, which right now are very different on the campuses. As you know, I've spent a lot of years at this university, so I know there's good arguments for why things should be different because the campuses are different. I get that. But that doesn't mean that there are things that shouldn't be the same when it comes to policies and procedures. When you have a decentralized structure, you oftentimes get things that are always different, never the same, just because of the nature of the structure, people doing their own things at each location. So that's the motive. That's the motivation for doing this. It's not about the people. As I said, they'll all be here until June 30th, and then things will change at that point. Now, the positions that we're creating in some ways can be seen as replacements at a higher level for the existing positions. And as I've said openly, even in my communication, this is not about the people who are in those positions right now. And I expect that some of them may apply for these new positions. And I think there's probably a pretty good chance of one or more of them actually landing in one of these new positions. I don't know what the outcome is going to be yet. We have a search going on. We'll see. We are committed to getting the best people in these positions. But if one of our applicants or more is from inside the university and they're successful in this process, they may very well be the new VP for Student Affairs. So that's the process. So the only positions that actually will not be replaced. So you have 6 positions that are involved right now, right? You have 2 campus executives, 2 deputy campus executives, 2 dean of students. Those are the only positions. And by the way, these are all leadership positions. The intent here is not to touch anything else that's operating on the campuses in these units. No intent whatsoever to do any of that. The dean of students at each campus will be replaced with a vice president for student affairs who will sit primarily on one campus and an assistant or associate vice president for student affairs. So the number of positions will not change. Only the titles will change. And as I said already, you may end up having one or more of the same people in those positions. The difference is the vice president for student affairs will now be in the president's council and will have oversight of what's going on each of the campuses and responsibility for that, working with the assistant or associate vice president, who may be primarily at one campus and not the other. But they will be speaking with one voice and with a charge to create as many uniform policies and procedures as make sense at both of the campuses. So we begin operating less like 2 universities and more like 1 university, whenever possible, okay? So those are the changes in that area. 2 get replaced with 2 higher level positions represented at the president's level, at the president's council. Now I don't have to worry about going forward. I got to talk to 3 different people to figure out what's going on. And in many instances, it's secondhand information. That voice now will be, student affairs will be represented at the highest level of the university and will be speaking with one voice, okay? That's the change. That's why I think it's important to make this change. As far as the campus executive offices are concerned, those offices will, as they exist, will go away, but they will be replaced with an office of the senior vice president for university operations. 2 campus executives now will be replaced by a senior vice president for university operations and an assistant or associate vice president for university operations, okay? We haven't worked out all the details, but my sense is, just like with the student affairs positions, one person in that 2-person team will sit on one campus and the other will sit on the other campus. So the only thing that's going to change as far as the students are concerned are the titles are going to be different. But now, instead of having 2 campus executives operating in a decentralized manner, 2 campuses, we're going to have one team that's overseeing operations on both campuses. And I'll have enough time to tell you what all the potential savings might be in having one team operating many things on different campuses versus having 2 different people doing their own thing, right? So what will be lost are the deputy campus executives. So our intent right now is not to replace those positions. So if there is a savings in that, that's where the savings is going to be achieved. I think with this new model, we don't need to have deputies because you're going to have one on each campus anyway, and that's what's going to be sacrificed, if you will. But There are other positions that some of those individuals might be applying to and move into. We just don't know how that's going to play out. So 6 becomes 4. The new four have different titles, but there will still be a representation on each campus. And I don't think the students, my sense, I'm doing this to make it better, not to make it worse. And I'm fairly confident that it's going to be better. So I think everybody just needs to be patient and let it play out. I completely understand the concern for the people. I share that concern. Believe me, those people work now for the university. And as I've said many times, they're all great people. But unfortunately, there comes a time in the evolution of any institution where you have to make decisions that are in the best interest of the institution, but may not be in the best interest of everyone individually. This is one of those circumstances, okay? I hope this works out well for everyone, but those are the circumstances. We're going to do everything we can to give very serious consideration to anybody that wishes to apply inside the university. And I suspect you're going to see some of our current people resurface in certain positions. And I'm not that concerned about that because I have confidence that it'll play out that way. As long as they apply, they have to apply. All right. Let me ask you: is that clear to you now? What we're doing?
Thank you for the clarification.
Ask you to do something when you speak to people. Make sure you explain this to them. We're doing this to improve things, to give student affairs and operations a voice at the highest level of the university. I want to hear this right away. I don't want to learn about it 2-3 weeks later and then have to do an investigation to figure out actually what happened. That's a lot of what's happening now that I think will change with this new structure. Okay?
Okay, thank you. I know that was something that is a large concern on all levels for students, and thank you for the clarification on that. I know whenever I did my article on like communication structures, like I tried to make it clear that like this makes it a more direct line of communication for you, which makes more sense in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, you maybe one day, and I hope you become the chief executive officer of an organization if that's your goal. But I can tell you, you can't have a president's council with 100 people on it. It just doesn't work. So that's why we have to get a little bit leaner to create this direct, pathway. Instead of having 2 of everything on the president's council, you have to have 1. And then the backup, the number 2 person is working as part of that team to make sure that area on each campus is being covered. But I don't think you're going to see a reduction in services to students. I think you're going to see things improve.
Okay, and that actually answers the last question I had, which is how can you assure that students' voices will still be heard with the new restructuring of offices? So I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add to that, but I think that pretty much.
Well, I think the students should know that I'm always available to them. No students ever called me when I was teaching, when I was doing any of the jobs that I've done and said, I need to talk to you. I've never said no to a student. I wouldn't, because my life is about serving students. That's what we all do at university. So this, anytime you've called and asked me, how many times have I said, no, I can't speak to you? Not once. And I'll tell you that will never happen because I think I applaud student activism. I think, they need to learn how to do things the right way in some instances, but I know their intentions are most always good, and they should have access to information. So I think, what students are doing is fine, and they don't have, as long as I'm president, students don't have to be concerned about their voices won't be heard. And the same is true of the faculty, because I consider myself to be one of them as well, since I served on the faculty so many years.
Great. Thank you so much for coming on today and talking to us. I'm really grateful for that. And I'm also excited to get this interview out to the campus body, just because I know that it's definitely going to answer a lot of people's questions that they've had regarding the spring semester and the restructuring.